Start the video, test out the webcam.
Okay. Pause this. Right.
Just FYI, this is Jill Ray with Supervisor Anderson's office. When I was in there yesterday, apparently the keyboard works best when it's at the table right under the screen.
Oh,
Okay.
thank you
Thank
for
you.
the tip, because it's been awkward.
Yeah, it won't work from anywhere else. They're working on a fix for that, but for right now, that table that's right under, like, it can't even be this table to the side. It has to be directly under the screen.
Oh my gosh, okay, well that's, and it's, the touchpad is really unfriendly. Poor Shelby, the first time we were in here was like desperately trying to manage it.
So I remember when I was a kid with the little rabbit ears on the TV, it's kind of the same thing now, isn't it?
Exactly. And Jamie, when you give a chance, if you want to make me a co-host, like I'm logged in as myself so that I can share screen. So I don't know if you guys heard, we also are having a power outage in this building. Because,
Yeah.
Oh,
is that the same, is that the right one?
Yeah.
I know there's two, yeah, it's really, really not friendly.
Okay,
Thank you, Jamie, sorry I gave you the crap job.
okay, we're here for that.
Awesome.
I was nervous that I was going to be one of the only people who couldn't make it because of the weather, but it seems
Coming
like
in?
it's not the case.
Yay! Welcome. Oh my gosh.
It's just me. I'm Wayne. Okay, you're good. And there's a sign in and a table can.
Okay, there you go.
There. I thought I'd just get out the office.
Yeah, no, well, you arrived just in time for the power to go out. And
I saw that.
we have mood lighting going on today.
yeah.
That's not bad.
Renee, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, Wayne.
We've
It's
been
going to
doing,
be interesting, the overlap in conversations. Is there a conversation happening in person as well as, did
Yeah.
Juno just try talking? I wasn't sure if there was an overlap.
today just showed up in person.
Oh, that's what that was.
Here.
I also put in a little word in there. It's
You
just gonna be
did, yeah, I
interesting,
thought so.
This is where the camera is.
Okay.
Those of you that are shy, see where I'm at? There are 2 seats off camera that you can't see for those that are shy next time.
Oh, you really, well,
Can you close the participants window? So this is what I'm wondering. Shoot. I'm trying to think of like how to make this less awkward. You know what, I can do that part from here. Sorry, guys, we're trying to figure out the logistics of how to make this. Who should be on?
I can join on mine too, but maybe.
Okay, maybe that'll be easier, but except for things are still gonna show on here. I don't know. We're gonna, yep. This is all a wild experiment.
And believe it or not, we got here at least 30 minutes early.
Oh, yeah, totally. The good news is you can see and you can hear. And I'm gonna just keep letting people in. Okay, next time, I have an idea about how to do this differently next time, but this is, you guys get to be our guinea pigs. This is our very first hybrid meeting. Okay, I think we can just start at least with intros so that, and I think a few more people are gonna roll in. You all are here for the Equity Committee for the Council on Homelessness. Yeah, this is gonna be very interesting now because all the chats are gonna show up on that screen. I don't know how to make this better. It's just gonna be what it's gonna be. Council on Homelessness, Equity Committee, this is our first time doing remote. We're still working out the kinks, so here we are. Let's do intros, and I think first let's do a quick roll call of the council members. So I'm gonna do a quick roll call, and then we'll have other folks. You can introduce yourselves in the chat. So I'll have Janae.
Yes, Janae Thomas, Workforce Development.
Awesome.
Yes, hi. Hey,
Welcome.
everybody.
And Joe.
Hi, everyone. Joe Bruno, peer support specialist, lived experience advisory seat.
Fabulous, thank you. And we've got Juno.
Hello, everybody. Juno Hedrick, Chair in the Council on Homelessness and Lived Experience Advisor. So YAC member.
Awesome.
Pronouns she, her, they, them.
Oh, yes, thank you. Pronouns, name and pronouns would be great. I don't see Kiva. She said she was probably gonna come, but we'll see. I know the weather is really wild out there. Leslie Gleason,
Hi, everybody. Leslie Gleason with Trinity Center. I'm in the COC ESG program representative seat, and I use she, her pronouns. And I may have to jump in and off of this because guess what? COVID is still alive and here, and a positive case just walked in our building. So
awesome. Sorry to hear it. Pat Mims is also on the committee, but I don't see him. And Wayne Earl.
My name is Wayne Earl, he, him, see, pastor of Rock Harbor Christian Fellowship in San Pablo, manager of special project of the Bay Area Rescue Mission. I hold the faith community representatives.
Awesome. And the good news is, Jamie, what I realized is that's showing in this room, but for the rest of the screen, it's actually just showing our camera. Wonderful. So that's good. I was trying to make sure you guys weren't having to see all the sausage making happening in the background. So I'm gonna share my slide deck. Hold on one second. Sorry, we're all a little discombobulated. Well, I'll speak for myself. I'm a little discombobulated today with the weather and in person. Working that out. Okay, let's try. I really just want to get my. It's not letting me do. There we go. Okay. Okay. As we say, now we're cooking with gas. We've got. Here we are.
Here we go.
We just did welcome and roll call. We've gotten at least one thing done in this meeting. Okay. The other thing I wanted to do was just open up for public comment in case there's anything anybody wants to discuss, or not discuss, but say that is not on the agenda. I'll just mention there's no decisions that can be made and no discussion that can happen. It's just an opportunity for the public to speak on anything that is not already on the agenda.
This is Joe Bruno.
Hi,
I am
Joe.
going to do a public comment, and I
Okay,
am going to say that I do not agree with the mandatory in-person meetings. And I think that it's causing a lot of unnecessary stress. And me, as who I am in my seat and the work that I do for the community, being in the mandatory in-person meetings has caused even more stress. So I just wanted to say that I will probably do a public comment in all committees that I'm in about the same topic. And that's that. Thanks. Joe Bruno, peer support specialist with Delta Peers.
thank you. And I see Jill and then Rachel.
Yeah, I just raised my hand not to have a conversation in this public space, but just to announce that the Board of Supervisors is doing a letter of support for the legislation that's been introduced in Sacramento to allow non-decision-making advisory bodies to continue in virtual meetings. You know, and as many of you know, it's the state law that's mandating this. It's out of our hands as a county. So we are supporting that piece of legislation in hopes that it can be passed and alleviate the stress that it's causing to our advisory bodies.
Thanks, Jill. And Rachel.
Yes, so thank you. I was going to say what Jill just said, and also say just more widely to others, including Joe, but there, as a community member outside of the Board of Supervisors, there are other channels that we could use to communicate to our senators, representatives, and I'm happy to do that. I can speak from my own experience. It is causing extreme stress in my life. And also just from other networks that I'm part of, it's the same across the board. I have heard not one person who is actually happy about the return to mandatory in person. So Joe and whoever else, I'm happy to kind of, conspire and communicate offline around these efforts too. So thanks for raising that, Joe. And Jill, thanks for sharing.
Thank you. Any more public comment? Okay. I realized, so I was out of town and our team did an amazing job covering all the things I usually do, which includes posting packets. I realized I think we forgot to post the minutes from the last meeting in the packet. The good news is, this is not really like, we're not making big decisions. So I will make sure to include those in the next, I will post them. Oh, Shelby, it was totally me.
I see them in the packet that I downloaded today, though.
Oh, you do?
Yes.
So I lied. Shelby did a great job and the packet, the minutes are in the packet. Thank you. So if anybody has any comments or anything that they want to say related to the minutes, now's a good time. I don't think there was anything earth shattering, mostly just recapping what we did in the meeting, which was for the most part drafting the surveys that we're going to talk about in a second. Thank you, Wayne. Any comments or questions about the minute? Okay. Shelby, by the way, has my undying gratitude because she did all of the things I usually do for 10 days while I was gone. Okay. So what I think we want to move to next, if my computer will behave. So Jamie, and I can switch seats with you if you want.
Yeah.
So Jamie is, and by the way, I changed your slides a little bit, but. Yeah, I'm gonna switch seats with you. Do you want to?
Do we need to approve the minutes?
We're not. It's a good question. I don't think we had it set up as a decision.
Okay.
We didn't have to look for the action.
Oh, I see. I got you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So hi, everybody. I'm actually gonna go back. So as you all may or may not be aware, I'll recap since I know we have some new faces in the room. The equity committee is really looking to find ways to expand access to services in our community. And one of the ways that we're trying to tackle that is to learn more about the way we're communicating about services and who we're giving this information to and what their understanding or their networks might be. And so to do this, one of the initial actions was to set up a survey for 2 different audiences. One of which being people with lived experience with homelessness. And thank you, Joe, for posting some links in the chat there. And then the other audience being what we're calling amplifiers. And these are folks who might be working with people who are experiencing homelessness or at risk of experiencing homelessness. They might be people who, run a service that has intersection with homelessness, such as like a basic needs diaper giveaway program or libraries. And so it's really meant to connect those folks who we haven't been as connected to in the past and reach new audiences because we want to eliminate disparities in our services that we see. So I'm going to go over some initial survey findings. These are not, the red team research evaluation data team. These are not red team, level findings. This is our initial first slice of the first round of survey responses we got, high level, that I wanted to share with you all. So first, like I said, there are 2 different audiences, and we've got 26 surveys from people with lived experience with homelessness, and 43 survey responses from amplifiers. Jamie, I couldn't figure out kind of how large the distribution that we sent this to was.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll move, I'm just gonna be the disembodied voice. So it's a really good question about how far and wide it went. So we included information about these 2 surveys in our COC newsletter that went out to about over 2,000 people. And then we did some targeted emails we've been building this like amplifier list. And so there was actually targeted emails that went out to people on the amplifier list, many of whom were already on that other like COC newsletter list. And then I've been tracking over the last couple of years, people who have identified as having a lived experience of homelessness. And that's probably about 100 people in our database. So I specifically emailed all of those folks. And then as part of the survey, we are asking people if they can spread it throughout their networks to people with lived experience and other amplifiers. So I think it's going to snowball. But I would say initially it probably went out to somewhere between 2,000 and 2,500 people.
Don't let that be discouraging when we only get 25 and 43, 26 and 43 responses. Survey response rates are just a real hard science to crack.
Yeah.
So this is actually, for us, it's feeling good. We're getting more responses than we have in our previous efforts. And like I said, it's just the first slice. So right off the bat, I'll share some of the more quantitative statistics that we saw. About 60% of people with lived experience have used homeless services in Contra Costa County. So these are generally folks who are familiar with the services that they tap into in our own community. They learned about services by either working with a service agency already. So maybe they already had an existing relationship with Farm or Source to Plowshares or another provider in the community that helps them get connected. Or they called 211, which for me was really heartening to hear, because that's one of our key messages. 211 is a great entry point for folks who can't get to a care center or might not have a relationship with Farm. Most people felt that they were confident that they could explain how to access services. So that also felt good to us because it meant that our message was clear enough for folks to feel confident that they could explain that to others. They might not necessarily, that doesn't tell us if they're explaining it correctly or if they're aware of changes and things like that. But it does tell us people, once they heard our message, they felt like they could repeat it. We had some really good feedback on how to improve our tools, our outreach tools. And for people with lived experience, some of the most important information that they pulled out is really how to get that housing, eviction prevention, shelter, and basic needs like shower, laundry, food, how to get those services. That's the immediate need. We had other options on there, like how to get a voucher and how to get connected to other things, but those were the ones that rose to the very top. We also asked kind of what platforms, what types of ways of getting this information would you be most interested in? And we got responses from transit ads, so ads on BART or bus, billboards, posters up in libraries and other places that folks are going, and social media. With some of the qualitative feedback we had some interesting information. Some of it we expected and some of it was new. So in terms of why weren't people accessing services in Contra Costa County when they needed them, some folks said we had the resources. Actually, I had enough float me to get a hotel room. I didn't need to go into a shelter or access another kind of service. Others cited they felt there would be a lack of responsiveness. I called, I never got a call back. I called this person, that person, had to do a little bit of hunting to try and find a way to get in. And then other folks felt there isn't help available. We know that we don't have the resources to solve all of the challenges that we face today immediately right now. And I think other folks are aware of that too. So they don't even think that they can get services that might help them. In terms of how to improve our outreach tools, some of the qualitative information we got from that was clear information, phone numbers, pictures of the facilities so they knew where they might be going, addresses, hours of operation, give folks the most important, straightforward, easy to understand information. Stay away from jargon, stay away from patronizing pictures, stay away from stigmatizing words. I think that was something we expected, and I'm glad to see it was confirmed. We also asked, who are your trusted partners? Who are the folks you might work with that we don't, as the system, necessarily engage with day in, day out, or have the strongest relationships with? And we got a really wide variety of answers that I was really interested in. So we got family members, that's my support network, that's who I go to for help. We also got churches, pastors, etc. Multiple people cited their therapist or case manager or mental health worker, and friends and peers. So word of mouth is really critical because a lot of those folks aren't necessarily working in service provision or nonprofit agencies, but they're interacting with their immediate network regularly. Any questions or thoughts, first responses before I move on to the amplifier survey?
And I'll add, we'll be able to provide like a much more complete set of the full data. This was just like our snapshot, because we're still gathering the data. We just wanted to, Jamie did a great job, just summarizing like what's available.
Rachel, I see your hand raised.
I just had a quick question, and I can't remember, I didn't open up the survey, so maybe this wasn't an option, but I was wondering if you had any specific feedback on what the jargon and or stigmatizing words that people didn't want to be used specifically were or are.
So what I'm remembering right now is I don't have it in front of me either, is things like crisis, things like homeless people, you know, those kind of loaded words were called out in a couple of responses.
The other thing I thought was interesting, and this is really reflective, so our sort of initial flyer we had done years ago had pictures of people who looked like they were experiencing homelessness. And I remember when we first started asking around about changing it, I got very clear feedback, like, that's not what we want to see. And that was also reflected in this survey of like, show us pictures of people housed or looking hopeful. We don't want to see people living in their cars and children looking desperate. And I was like, oh, right, that makes total sense. I think the initial thought was like, we want to make sure you see yourself, and people are like, that's not how I see myself. That's not helpful, or is not going to make me want to engage. So I think that was really useful feedback.
And I have a question sort of along that. So homeless services, when I was homeless longer than I thought I was.
Yep.
Because I was staying in a garage. This still blows my mind how I missed that. I accessed homeless services before I knew it was, how are they identifying if they're homeless services or not?
Yeah.
You know, how can we improve our messaging so that it's for more than that?
Great.
Okay, I'll move us along to amplify. Or Jamie, is there anything in the chat that?
I don't see anything in the chat. Oh, wait, hold on, let me just see. Oh, just folks talking about how they're amplifying the survey, which is great. So awesome.
Wonderful. Yeah. So starting with some of that quantitative data in the amplifier survey. Like Jamie mentioned, this was distributed through our COC newsletter. It was distributed through some direct outreach with folks. We're really trying to bring in people who might not be aware of the COC, but we know are working with people who are experiencing homelessness or who are at really immediate risk of experiencing homelessness. So we've had like a list of churches that we reached out, like you guys work on the list with us, so you know who's on there. But it was really trying to cast a very broad net. A little over half of us that, and Jamie, did you change these numbers?
I did, yeah, I updated them today. You're probably like, what?
I was like,
Yes,
just want to
updated
make sure I'm giving you the right info. A little over half of them said that they were confident that they can describe to others how to access services. So that's pretty good. We can definitely room to improve, but for folks who don't engage with the system very often, it was nice to see that a majority didn't feel confident describing how to access services. We got a really geographically diverse region, which was exciting, regional perspective. At least 12 agency responses came from each section of the county, west, central, east, and south. And then there were folks from far east. It was actually very diverse. So that was great to see. And then a large majority, 74%, had contact with 6 people experiencing homelessness a month or more. So I think it was closer to about 25% that they thought 20 people or more every single month who are experiencing homelessness. So these are folks who are engaging regularly with people, could be really good opportunities for us to, you know, leverage and amplify the message of how to connect to services. When we asked them about how to improve our outreach tools, for them, the most popular way of finding information is by calling 211. So again, really great that that message has been clear, that 211 is a connector. And that was by far, in a way, the top reason. Most important information was a little bit different than from folks experiencing homelessness. The things that they our amplifiers most wanted to know about is how to get emergency rental and utility assistance for the eviction prevention sort of service, how to get basic needs, how to get a housing voucher, which again is different than how to get housing. So they identified the voucher component, and then how to connect to mobile outreach to our core team. And they identified, you know, flyers, posters, and content for email blasts and newsletters were the most popular tools for them to be able to share information and to learn from other agencies that they might be working with about services available in our county. On the qualitative end, we asked, hey, how would you describe what happens when you want to access services in Contra Costa? You know, we're trying to get a sense of how accurate information sharing might be. And some of the clearest responses are, you know, 211 is going to be the place that you get referred to for resources. So that was great, because that's what 211 does. They've set expectations with folks. You might not receive a placement or resources. Like we know that is a challenge that most of us work with every day. And you're gonna have to wait. A lot of times it's not an immediate service. That you can do that at a care center very often. You can walk in and, you know, start talking to someone right away, but when you're calling in to get resources, that might not be the case. And then some folks were just not sure. I'm not sure what happens when you call 211 or try to access services in another way. So that was another theme that floated up through all of the responses we got. And we asked, what other information is going to be helpful to you when you're working with folks? So these were kind of the key things that were identified there. How to help when shelters are full. We know sometimes there aren't beds available, particularly at shelters that, you know, might have single rooms or non-congregate and are kind of more highly desired, or might be in areas that people are more wanting to go to. And so the amplifiers identified, we want to know what to do if that's the case. How do we help people in that situation? We got a lot of folks asking, how do we get resources for youth? And some of them I identified specifically transition aged youth, those 18 to 24-year-olds. That was a population that had some focus. And then how do we provide the resources for basic needs like food, ID, storage, and transportation? So those are some of the ones that were specific basic needs called out. Were there any surprising information presented in the amplifier survey, or any thoughts or comments online in the room?
Welcome back, Leslie.
Well, actually, the only thing that comes to mind is, are there, the storage question comes up. We have, like the rains right now, we have people that want to come into our shelters, but we don't have the capacity to store their things, you know? Is there an option in the county for storage?
We
that can
haven't,
refer them to?
we have not figured that out. We've offered support that kind of one-on-one with providers, like, can we look into renting a pod that you can store on your site? What are some ways that we can solve this? Because there's not one uniform solution that we don't have like a spare storage facility somewhere.
Yeah.
That's not infrastructure. We've got that stuff in the county right here.
Yeah, it's something we're thinking about.
Definitely.
And if you go to the net, there's actually one more slide that just shows you. So one of the, okay.
One of the very last questions we asked on both surveys was, okay, we asked you all these questions. Would you be interested in seeing what we do with this information and how we improve our tools, and then reviewing how we incorporate your feedback into those things? So drafts of flyers, posters, whatever it is that we develop within this committee and within the council. Are you interested in helping us get that feedback on those items? And 37 amplifiers, I think out of 46, I said, said yes, it's a large majority there, and 14 out of 26 people with experience, so a little over half there said, yep, we're interested. And to be very clear, people with lived experience who are lending their expertise in this situation would be compensated for their work on behalf of the council. Yep. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I appreciated the automated, I think it was automated, the response back after submitting this portion of it, saying, you know, like, because there was a response that said something like, it was a long email saying, you know, here, share it with your folks and, you know, spread the word. And I just wanted to comment and on that return email was pretty impressive.
Okay. Those were sort of the initial data findings, and I'm going to pass it over to Jamie. She's going to talk about some of the demographics and our reach.
I just got back from vacation on Saturday and on Sunday I couldn't help myself. I had to like log on and look at all the data survey and all the data results because I really wanted to see what was happening. And I'm really excited about getting all this data. So this is really hard to see, but what I also wanted to show, one of the questions that we always have is like, are we getting representative feedback that's like representative of the population we're serving? So that's why we asked all these demographic questions. So for amplifiers, we wanted to know like, what populations are you serving? Are you serving the populations that we're seeing in our system of care? And what we saw was yes, right? So you can see, we sort of asked like, do you frequently serve people in these different categories or identities? So the most common, the ones were Black, African-American, Hispanic, Latinx, people at risk of homelessness, people experiencing homelessness, and people with disabilities. So that's good. That tells me that like the amplifiers that we have been asking about actually know our population and know a lot of the challenges that are coming up. For people with lived experience, we are asking how they personally identify. And so we saw them, the most common were Black or African-American, Hispanic, Latinx, and have a disability. So again, that makes me really happy to know that we are capturing a somewhat representative population. I think we can do a better job because again, this is out of 26, right? So we have N means like the total number of responses. So I think that's something we can continue. I think this data gathering process with the surveys, we're going to keep it open for a while and continue to kind of let that snowball, because I'm kind of thinking about this in two ways. Like, yes, we're gathering data, but we're also identifying champions and like people who can be amplifiers once we get this stuff really going. So that's just like a snapshot about the surveys. I also wanted to say we did translate it into Spanish and it has been made available in Spanish. Yes, so Rachel, I see your comment. So concerned about the lack of amplifier connections to Native American Indigenous populations. Let me see if I can see the full comment. The numbers are low overall population-wise, but given they're 8 times overrepresentation in the COC, that's concerning. Yeah, and one of the things that we've really tried to figure out in our office, and I think we said this in different meetings, is there is often a like big crossover between folks that identify as Hispanic, Latinx, and Native or API, and so, or sorry, not API, Native American or American Indian. And so sometimes that's like, it gets a little mushy. And that's something I think we're continuing to try and figure out how to better identify what we actually mean when people are identifying in those different ways. But yes, I hear you. It's a concern.
We see that a lot too. Yeah, we see it a lot too.
Yeah.
One thing I'll note, sorry, it's a little off topic, but related, is that HUD will be changing their data standards eventually, and I think the direction that they're moving is to parse out ethnicity and race in a different way. Because when you get those race ethnicity questions, a lot of folks, myself included, are like, I'm checking these boxes, but I don't know if they really fit for me, and I can be Hispanic, but not necessarily identify as like, and they might feel pressure to choose an option. And so I'm really interested to see how that translates to our future data. So that won't be known probably for a couple of years, but just putting it out there, HUD hearing that this particular question can be difficult to really understand our population, and changes hopefully are afoot.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jamie.
Yes. So if I can see from here,
I know.
the red bar is the disabilities bar.
Yep.
The green bar is the Latinx bar.
Yep. And the red one is
And
red
the blue
disability. Yeah.
bar is the black African American
Correct.
bar. And so nobody's monolithic. The red bar is disabilities. Did we break that down by
We said
race?
no. So we basically said, do you have any of these identities? So there could be somebody who identifies as Black and Latinx and has a disability, so they might check all 3 of those boxes.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So it's basically like, do any of these identities apply to you, or do you identify with any of these? So somebody really could be almost all of these at the same time. I mean, maybe not the H ones, but for the most part. Yeah, so there is crossover. That's a good question. So I think the other question, and I'm gonna just show this next slide, but then I think go back. So the next question is like, are there, in terms of like looking at this, are there any key populations we want to try and do some even more targeted outreach with both amplifiers and people with lived experience? And do we have ideas about that? So we can see where we have some representation. We can also see where we don't have a lot of representation. If we start with the amplifiers, like, are there of these, like, are there populations that we either feel like we really want to make sure we get even more input from, or and do you have any suggestion for who we might target? And I know it's a little hard because we can't right now see who actually already responded, but we can take notes on that and go back and see. Is there anybody that we haven't heard from or missed? Yeah, so youth, foster unaccompanied Tay.
Just sort of a question. So the question for the amplifiers, here, you're asking them, who do you serve?
Yep. Who do you serve most frequently?
So, as one of the amplifiers, here's one of the challenges in asking this question, and why, like, for example, I know because I do the data at farm, that we basically more than doubled our serving of Native American populations,
Right.
you know, this year.
Yep.
The challenges, these are self-identifying populations. So, like you mentioned, a lot of them identify as Hispanic or Latinx,
Yep.
you know, and one or the other. So some of this is challenging to get,
Totally.
you know. The other thing we've seen a significant increase is Asian population,
Mhm.
which isn't even on here.
Good point.
So, that was our largest increase in services. Now, it went from a very, very minuscule,
Right.
you know, so it's a couple of people will make a difference, but it was enough to be noticeable.
Uh-huh.
You know, I'm just wondering, how are we asking these questions?
Yeah.
You know, because depending on how we lead with them, you might get different answers.
And Joe, I see your hand up.
Am I unmuted? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, great. I'm in double windows right now. My thought right now is going a little deeper into the Native American community, because I'm wondering, I don't know for sure in Contra Costa County if there is a specific advocacy group. I know that there is one for the Bay Area, and I want to reach out to them specifically and see if they know somebody in Contra Costa County that to network with. But I feel like there's got to be some group that we can, an organization. I mean, I can use the term like the tribe. Like we can go back to, I don't know. I'm just wondering. Like, my brain is working overtime on that lately, trying to figure out where to touch base with Native American population in Contra Costa County.
I've got some friends I could ask. They're very, very involved. I got some friends I could ask, and it might be, I don't know if there's anything specific to Contra Costa.
Yeah.
That kind of is the question.
Yeah, that's the question. If there's something specific to Contra Costa.
Doesn't matter if it's a regional, I mean, does it matter from our perspective?
I mean, I think regional is better than nothing.
Okay.
So, yeah, and I think it's worth asking. I also think, you know, we know popular people travel around the Bay Area, so I think that's a good question. And we may, Contra Costa County Native American.
Yes.
Great. So we have some ideas.
So the other thing is, it's been my experience that veterans groups have a large Native American population access to. So reaching out to groups like Swords to Plowshares, things like that. Yeah.
I'm sorry for Plowshare.
Oh, that's right.
I can check in, with our. And we'll keep our data. Very diligent.
And speaking to the overlap too, I really like how when you target a large group, a lot of times you're lifting all boats, right? And so not everything we develop will be applicable to all the small segments within those larger groups. But if we can come up with some really great tools that can be really targeted to some of the most prevalent populations we're seeing, we're gonna be making a lot of progress. So I'm excited for this work.
Joe, you got your hand up?
Nope.
Oh, that was from earlier. Okay. Let me just look at the people's lived experience. So, looking at this group too. And the other thing we can do is I can go back and do an analysis now that we've got like a good chunk of responses. And see who the agencies are. And then I'll go back to the original amplifier list and see if there's any people we want to go. I was gonna say harass, but it doesn't read. Tough to get.
Could you give an unknown agency a day or two to actually get the survey done?
Yeah.
Get on vacation too.
Yes, we will create some social pressure to reply.
And if you all are interested in sharing out the survey further with
Yeah.
people who are experiencing homelessness, please be aware, we are looking to raffle off some gift cards for folks who complete the survey and leave their information. So that could be a nice way to lead if people are on the fence about completing.
Did we offer 2 more races? Good question. So basically, Rachel, the way we did it was like, do any of these apply to you? So, you know, as I said, like somebody could be Black and Latinx and they could pick both of those. So they could pick as many of these as they wanted. But good question. We didn't put multiracial as a category. But tried to put the categories that we know in terms of specific races and ethnicities that we see overrepresented. What's tricky is like we do see multiracial overrepresented, but we kind of don't know what that mix is necessarily.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, I know, I mean, there's also crossover on African American and Native American identification too. It doesn't get as kind of like discussed or talked about as much as the crossover between Hispanic and Latinx, but that is a group. So I was just thinking in that vein, like if there was overlap, but it wouldn't be visible from this, so.
I mean, the other thing that we can do is analysis to see how many people selected both, you know, like we could do the cut of data in a way that looks different from this. Alex, I saw your question. So no, we right now don't have an official end date. Kind of on purpose. Like I think we want to keep going for a while and let this snowball. I do think we're gonna come to a point like when we really get deep into the drafting where we might end it, but honestly, like I'm okay continuing to get input and data because again, I'm really thinking of these surveys also as like identifying potential relationships and advocates and amplifiers. So I know it's a weird to have a survey with no official end date. That's not typically how you do it. But I mean, if people feel strongly that we need to do that, we totally can. I just kind of intentionally have been leaving it open.
And I was gonna say too, if there is gonna be a deadline to it, then maybe revisiting it during like November when it's Homeless Awareness Month.
Yeah.
When we can revisit it and send it out again, or just keeping it open. I like the idea of keeping it open.
One thing I did just realize though, as I was saying that, is we said that we would sort of do a drawing for gift cards and maybe we do that periodically throughout the process. So that if people aren't waiting indefinitely.
I do have a question. So
Yeah.
I'm thinking about my networks.
Yeah.
So all of my Native American networks are related to Alcoholics Anonymous, to be
Yeah.
honest with you. How loosely are we defining amplifier?
Good question.
Because there's lots of groups and organizations
Yeah.
and friends and all of that, but you know, is it appropriate? It's more, you know, band of brothers, band of friends than
Yeah.
anything else.
In my mind, amplifiers basically means you could, so like, there are people that are people with lived experience that are also amplifiers.
Yes.
So you, Joe, Juno, like there are people that have lived experience and may take the survey that way and may also take the amplifier survey. I think about amplifiers as like, do you have contact with people who need this information? Whether that's formally in a paid position or informally. And this is part of what we want to identify is like, who are the champions or leaders in communities that people are trusted resources for information.
Give me a little time. I'm going to reach out to some friends.
Cool.
I know. Yeah.
Great. I'm all for, because also what we see reflected, what Jamie presented is like a lot of people, especially for people who lived experience, they're trusted sources of information very likely may not be quote the system. It's going to be a friend, a sponsor, like a pastor, a rabbi, a something that's not necessarily, they're not like paid to provide homeless services.
Mhm.
So I'm all for those networks, getting this.
And Wayne, I just want to pinpoint real quick that I appreciate you bringing up the AA and the sponsor, because I don't think that part has come up yet in the amplifiers conversation. And I think that is definitely a community that would amplify this conversation even further.
Yes,
It'd be great.
that is a massive part of my support network. So yeah, no, and everyone in mind, yeah.
That's awesome. And I'll say like, this actually comes up around the point in time count surveys of, when we're asking about people with disabilities. So it's not necessarily like, do you use substances, or do you struggle with like depression, anxiety? It's like, is it debilitating? Is it disabling? So there's this category of like people with disabilities, and we include substance use disorders and mental health. Like, you know, I think advise your folks, like, if that makes the most sense for them to tag it that way, but there's no pressure.
Some of it is of an age. If I could put this out, so I'm half white, half Native American, right? And you can't necessarily tell that by looking at me, but if you see some of my cousins, it's very apparent,
Right.
you know. And growing up of the age, we were kind of forced to choose.
Right.
You know, and so that kind of carries with you for a while, you know, and it has other impacts on you. So I know people that that growing up identified as Hispanic, but identify as Native American now, you know, just all kinds of things like that.
Yeah, and I appreciate that's part of why we're trying to leave these options open, like pick all that apply, because I think a lot of us have complex identities.
Yes.
And we don't want to, you know, HUD sometimes makes people check a very tight box.
Mhm.
That is not what we're going for here. Awesome. Other comments about sort of the outreach piece?
So have you reached out to individual churches, not just, okay,
Yeah, good question. So Kiva, I don't know if you could hear, Kiva asked, like, have we reached out to individual churches? And the answer was yes. So like, actually on that ginormous amplifier list, a lot of what was on there were actually churches that have food pantries or feeding programs. So we connect, that's like the first slice that we did, but if you all and anybody else you know has like other networks, I think it's very common for people to go to, if they're affiliated, to go to their congregation to seek support if they're falling on hard times.
or if they're not,
Or if they're not.
or
right?
been in church all my life and people come to the closest church and ask for resources. So
Exactly.
it's not uncommon.
Yeah.
And that's why, you know, I imagine that you reached out to Brett, for instance, but if you, that's why I was asking if you reached out to individual churches that are not particularly in a network. Okay.
And if anybody has questions, like I can shoot you over the amplifier list and you can see if the ones you're thinking of are already on there, or you can just shoot us the names and a contact. If you have like a warm contact, that's best for a lot of the churches. Like I just found the like info or pastor at such and such. A warm contact is always ideal for this kind of thing. So if you have those, like this is an ongoing process. But now that we've gotten our first pass, we can see who's responded and then start to dig a little deeper.
There's one other thing with specific populations. So I don't have data to quantify this, so do forgive me if I'm misspeaking, but it has been my experience. So the data to quantify this is that African American, particularly women, huge support in the church.
Absolutely.
Huge support in the church, you know, way more so than other people. And what I've seen because of the work I do in the church community is the Hispanic population is the same thing. There's huge, so unofficial networks going on. So I think there's a lot out there that we don't normally have contact with. And let me we have a Hispanic pastor and congregation. Let me reach
I
out.
was gonna say, as the faith representative, this is like, you just give yourself a job to help, like, maybe look at the list we have. Definitely. I think that, you know, we wanna have your expertise for
This is part
sure.
of why I jumped on all these committees. It's like, okay, I'm not looking at this.
Yeah.
And I also know of AAPI,
Yes. Great.
churches.
Give me all those
Yeah.
contacts and names of, and we can cross-reference with our list that we already have.
And just to go back to the multiracial thing.
Yeah,
There are unknown amount of Black people who are Native American. as
Oh,
well.
absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. Yep. yeah. Hi, welcome.
Hi, I know I am extremely late,
Oh,
but
you're good.
Melvin Willis on behalf of the Racial Justice Coalition, and I am one of them.
Excellent. We're really glad to have you.
All right, thank you so much. Hey, good to meet you. Sorry for being late again.
It's wild up there. Our power, I think, is still maybe out in this building and we're, you know, so we have a bunch of folks
Making
on
our way
Zoom
through it all.
too. Yeah, it's an adventure today. So we were just catching up. We just have deployed a couple surveys out in the community, one for people with lived experience and one for what we're calling amplifiers, which are essentially people who may have contact with folks with a lived experience of homelessness, to try and gather more information about what kinds of materials, data, not data so much, but like, what do people need to know when they're first experiencing homelessness about how to get connected? So I'll make sure you have a copy of that if you have not already.
I had a question about the printed surveys.
Yeah,
Where do they get sent to once they're completed?
yeah, the last page of this, oh, go ahead, Joe.
I was just gonna say that I think that some of the networks that I want to connect with this survey, I'm either going to be in person on my phone completing
Yeah.
it for them,
Yep,
or it's going to be a written one. So you saw on the last page, there's something on the last page.
there's something on the last page, so your options are, you can physically drop it off at our office, you can fax it, you can email it, or you can actually take pictures of it and text it to me.
Nice.
Yeah,
Lovely. I like it.
so you can do any of those ways, and the last page of both the English and Spanish give those 4 options in big bold print.
That's great.
Yeah. Other questions about the sort of demographics of who we've been doing outreach to? Okay. I'm gonna, if you're open to this, oh, and this is really, really hard to see, but
We'll get the voice over.
okay.
Sorry, this is, y'all can tell, this is our first time doing our in-person, so we're musical chairs the whole time. Okay, so, until my eyes stay up to this,
You know, sorry, it's tiny.
we asked questions, like I said earlier, about what are the best ways to share information? How are you accessing these notices? And for our amplifiers, for them, they said, give us content to build our newsletters. And who doesn't like a crowdsourced newsletter? I would love that too. Give us flyers that are clear, straightforward, those sorts of things. Posters for display at service sites. So, you know, we put up COVID posters everywhere for the last 3 years or so. We can do the same with information on how to access housing. And then a QR code, which I think would be so great. You know, put a QR code wherever you can. People have cell phones with cameras nowadays, and that can be really helpful to get easy, quick access.
Does anybody need an explanation of what a QR code is?
I'll be extra thorough just in case people don't want to say. A QR code is like a little graphic that you can put onto printed materials, online materials, and it's basically a barcode. So something you can scan with a camera or a scanner, and it'll direct you to a website or to an information portal or a document or whatnot. They're really flexible. And so if we put that on all of our materials and directed them to 211's directory, for example, or our call core care flyer, that could be a way of spreading information easier.
Can I observe something?
Yes.
Because I'm the Generation X, so I'm the Generation X who was an IT guy, right?
Uh-huh.
So I'm noticing the difference between amplifiers and people with lived experience, and QR codes aren't. So when I was on the streets, A, I had a really bad phone that didn't do QR codes, and B, I had no data.
Okay.
I think, you know, I'm not sure. When the amplifier is asking for a QR code, is that for them to use?
Question.
Yeah, that's kind of,
Yeah.
because I've seen it over and over again.
Yep, I think that it can be used for both groups, right? Because imagine you've got your flyer up in your Sunday dinner session
Mm.
at your church. And someone comes up and says, hey, I'm interested in doing that. It's easy for you as the person who's kind of running that Sunday dinner program to use your phone and scan. You don't have to go back to your laptop and take to the website or try and share that out. So I think it can be used in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, well, actually, I didn't learn how to use the QR code function on my phone till about last year. And even still, someone's like, just use the QR code thing, and I have some spontaneous burst of anger. Yeah, you know, don't take it out on anything. Say, all that being said, I'm not against the idea altogether, but just makes me, you know, ask a bigger data question, like how many homeless individuals actually have access to a cell phone, how many of them have that type of capacity to do that, and even if they do have access to the cell phone, do they know how to do the QR code scanning thing that was making me a millennial want to throw my phone into a wall?
Yep, those are all great questions, and, you know, it's supplemental to the actual physical material. It would never just be a barcode that we put out there, it would be on top of our flyer. I think our goal is to provide the biggest menu of options that meets the needs of the widest variety of people possible.
And the other thing related to this, part of why I wanted to highlight like what came to the top is because our next phase of things is gonna be like starting to draft some content, and we probably don't wanna draft like 10 different things. So this helps us sort of focus on like basically 6 or 7, which I feel like is manageable. Versus like 14 different variety of products. And there's
What I like about this data, these stars between the amplifier and the people with lived experience, is that we could, like Jamie S said, you know, when we had COVID, we had big posters out everywhere. And those big posters can be transferred into a billboard, can get transferred into a flyer. So we can have that same content, all the same color coding, but then it can just be different sizes depending on what outlet that it goes to. Because I love the fact that billboards is prominent on people with lived experience perspective. That's great. I've got like the best billboard thing for this whole, I've got the best thing. It's hilarious. I'm already there.
I like the idea of billboards and the advertisements in transit. Because we know that that's a lot of place, that's a large area where our unhoused go. And billboards get your attention, and you don't have to be really specific and detailed with billboards. Just get some 211 really big, and then just a few pieces of other information, and it's gonna really work.
So, all right.
Oh, yeah, and on where the star, it says, posters for display at service sites. I don't know if we were just thinking about community centers or churches, but one thing that comes to mind for me is, you know, any local city hall within the county, but also grocery stores and community
Libraries.
plaza areas, libraries, because there's a lot of traffic constantly coming in. We're putting posters and getting permissions outside of the larger businesses. That's gonna be very noticeable for folks constantly having traffic through those areas. And welfare offices too.
And schools.
One of the things that we do is we've got little cards like this. It's got how to get to the rescue mission on one side and a QR code on the other side, you know? And we distribute with everything, with our hygiene kits and all of that. We give them out to our churches. So when they're doing outreach into encampments and all of that, they're distributing it out to people that may have never come to us. So things like that. Getting a bunch of these things to core. You know.
I wouldn't even leave out laundromats.
Oh, yeah.
That's,
Yeah.
you know, that's a big place, foot traffic for people who are in transition.
I did talk to the board of directors of Contra Costa Food Bank. And as long as we send our people to the sites, we can give out as much information about homelessness as we want. They won't be giving it out, but we send our people to the sites. You know, if I go to the site, they go to the site and give out flyers or card with a QR code back.
Yes. Y'all jump right in. Those were some of the top ways. One of the things that I'll also call attention to is social media. That's not something that our amplifiers identified as a way to share information, but people that experience said, yep, we're on Twitter, we're on TikTok, we're on Instagram, like, put information out there, because we follow this information, and I think it also ties in with the responses we got to who do you trust? Your friends, your family, your network, the folks you're probably connected to on social media. So I think that was an interesting thing and definitely something we've probably underutilized for a long time.
I can't wait until we get to the point where we have badges. You know, if we have social media badges and H3 and our council has our own like page on Facebook somewhere, like that's amazing. That's awesome.
So Facebook, you might have just sent a chill up county council's neck.
I know. So health services has social media, like it would probably go through a contrast to health services, but we are working with their media team really closely, and I'm actually about to pull them in as we get into this next phase to help us develop these materials. Like that is their expertise, and they have the channels for social media and journalists and all that stuff once we are ready for a big splash. Yeah.
Before I went homeless, I worked in online advertising. So, yeah, there's a lot of reach there. It's full of reach.
Awesome. We're gonna pick your brain.
I think one day I'm gonna read your book. I think one day I'm gonna read Wayne's book.
Oh my God.
Send it out the wire after.
You and Terrace House have had like 13 lives.
And they've all prepared me for this one.
Yep.
Nothing has been wasted. This is my life right here. Thank you.
I think when the time comes and we start talking about the social media presence, I think it would be a good idea that we, as the equity, as the COH even, like we attach either our organization to that page and tag it and, you know, like really actually get involved on social media and like communicate with each other online, you know, and share the material that way, because that's what gets it noticed.
I do have a question in regards to, when we get to that phase of media.
Yeah.
I know there was mention of, how we want to stay away from certain verbiage and wording. In this survey, was there an area for them to suggest, verbiage and wording that they would prefer?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we said, what are the things you want to see? What are the things you don't want to see in terms of like language and images? But then, and we also said, are there things that would catch your attention? So things like colors or words or pictures. So we do have all of that. And I think when we get to the next chunk, which we might take a 5-minute break and then get to that and have to build a working group, but to really dig into that and really do a comb of what people said. Yeah. I really appreciate everybody's thoughtfulness in developing this survey. Now that we're getting the results, I'm like, oh, I'm so glad that we asked that question. What a great question. This is going to be really useful. So yeah. Good. That's a good question.
So one last thing before we possibly take a
Yeah.
5.
Yes. So we're thinking we're gonna just talk about this for a minute, then take like a 5-minute bio break, because I know people have been sitting and whatnot. So I want to check in both for official council members, but also anybody that's on this meeting. Are there people that are interested in being in a working group? So we won't have to meet in person, FYI, as a working group, we can do things remotely. But basically to start to like brainstorm and start to draft some of these materials, and we'll be working with what we call CEI, that's our county like community health services communications team. So for any of you that like want to nerd out on actually building some of this stuff and helping think about words and all of that. So I see Rachel, yes.
Joe is an absolute.
Obviously, okay.
Same with me and Juno.
Okay, Juno. And also, like, you're not gonna sign your first child away, like, if you say you're interested, I'm not gonna hunt you down. And you can also join in later.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I was gonna be like 10.
Let me get this Brown Act thing underneath.
Yes, exactly. Our media consultant. Okay,
You can add me to the
Okay.
email list for sure.
Wait.
I just can't commit to attending every meeting.
no. So the other thing I was gonna say is like, just the format is basically, we'll have like this working group that will probably meet between our council meeting, equity committee meetings. But we'll be bringing, basically we'll be like working on some stuff and bring it back to the full group. And like really chew on it there, and then pull together some more stuff. Cause this next quarter, just to like refresh, so first quarter, we're at the end of the first quarter. Holy smokes, we made it, and we did what we wanted to do, like gather information. So that we can do this next phase. This next quarter is really about the like drafting and developing.
Mhm.
By the end, January, March, April, May, June, so by the end of June, what we want to do is then have some like. Not totally perfect shiny things, but then that next quarter, really like pilot things and do a lot of feedback. That's where we're gonna use all those people that said like, yeah, look at your drafts. That's where we're gonna really fine tune stuff. And then the last quarter is we're really gonna focus on spreading things out. And create some mechanisms to get feedback, right? We're not gonna get, nothing's perfect. We're not gonna, but we're also not gonna let perfection be the enemy of the good. So we're gonna get things in as best shape we can and spread them out. And then, you know, like this group will continue to monitor, and we'll probably do some testing as we go and see how things are landing. But next phase is going to be that drafting and development. Other questions, or people want to throw their hat in the email list ring?
A question on
Yeah,
that.
please.
I'm gonna, I wanna do all the things, but,
I know.
but need to sleep.
Yeah.
And could you throw out an email
Yeah.
later on, let me chew on it for a while?
Totally.
You know, but include me in the meeting and, you know.
Yes.
So.
What I'm gonna, I think my next step will be, I will, these like 6 people that have said, yep, I'm interested. I'm gonna work with them to find a like meeting date and time that works for all of them. And then I will throw that out to our whole equity group list and say like, okay, this is when it's happening. If you can make it, great. If not, we're gonna have more than one meeting. But I think we'll work with this group of 6, Joe, Gino, Kiva, Janelle, Rachel, and Melvin. And then take it from there. Sound good?
Sounds good.
I'm with, I'm. Time to sleep.
I know, sleep is overrated. No, it's not.
No, it's
My
not.
grandma, I know I'm teasing. My grandma said that.
Every year I
Even
get
Rachel said,
more
even Rachel said that in the
sleeping in
comments.
the heat.
Overrated.
Over now. So let's take 5 minutes. We'll come, I don't have my watch. Let's come back at 3:16. I'm gonna set a little timer. Take your bio break, get up and stretch. We're just gonna take a quick break. And then we're gonna come back. Reconvene at 3:16. Kind of stand up while I can. Oh, good. Oh, my goodness. Bathrooms, if people need them, are
Wait a second. All right. Okay. Hey, Sarah, you're not on mute. Oh, sorry.
Y'all ready? There we go. Okay. I'm back already? Yeah. Ready? Welcome back, everyone. Okay. So, one of the things that we had talked about in our work plan was coming up with equity definition. Not because we don't necessarily all know what it is, but because we want to make sure we're speaking a common language as a committee, as a group. And so what we're gonna walk through are just some recommendations for definitions that we adopt. And if we don't finish that conversation today, that's fine. But we wanted to start it. We want to start the ball rolling. We wanted to have something that's foundational. So it might not be a perfect fit really, but it could be something we work off of for now and come back to and revisit. So I'll just jump right in unless folks have questions before. So first, and apologies for the small print, and my eyes are getting a workout today. But first, just starting from the bare beginnings of what is race and what is racism. So race is a social construct created in the 17th century by white Europeans to justify enslavement of Africans and spread of colonialism. These are definitions, again, that we were provided by C4 Innovations, the group that worked with us to conduct our racial equity evaluation. And that was really the very beginning of this work as the committee, what sprung forth. So that's where a lot of these definitions are coming from. I'll try not to read word for word, but races, an understanding of race as a concept has changed over time. But outcomes of discrimination based on race remain entrenched in our system. Racism is a system of institutional systemic oppression and practices of society that shape cultural beliefs and values that support racist policies and practices. How do folks feel about these two beginning definitions? Do they fit well enough with kind of the way that we talk about things in this committee?
I mean, this may, for me, just be like a theme throughout. I'm fine with the definitions in general. I think the thing that I haven't seen yet is, just like how are we defining equity? Like equity isn't giving somebody $5 who already has 100 and giving $5 to somebody who has 0. So it's just like, how are we?
Far ahead of my slides.
Okay. I'm planning to take my comments down to the presentation.
The other thing I was gonna ask Jamie or add or bring up is like, where and how will we use these definitions? And I'm thinking, at the end of all of our council agendas, we have our acronym list, like our glossary. And I'm wondering if it makes sense to put it there so that everybody always has access to this language that we have agreed upon. And if conflicts come up or people have questions, that we just start to institutionalize where this stuff goes. And that may inform how we decide to word things or how big or long we make them. The other thing I keep thinking about with this is just around as an equity issue is thinking about literacy. And some of this is very jargony and very technical. And so what is the problem we're trying to solve? Why do we want to have this? So it's hard because the training we got was really kind of a 200 to 300 level training, which was amazing. And what I struggle with is how do we make this simple enough that people can understand it, but specific enough that it actually means something? And so I keep thinking about how are we going to use this and where are we going to use it? So I'm just putting that all out. Alex, I see your hand up. Oh, you're gonna see your lips moving, but your mouth is quiet.
Sorry, not used to doing this from my phone. Okay, so just picking up on the sort of equity definition piece. Because really, this says race equity, and then we talk about race and racism. And I actually at the National NAEH conference last week, there was a presentation and they presented some definitions from Race Forward, where they talked about racial equity being a process of eliminating racial disparities and improving outcomes for everyone. It's the intentional and continual practice of changing practices, systems, and structures by prioritizing measurable change in the lives of people of color.
Say that.
And to both of what you were saying. So yes, that was an amazing presentation. I was at the conference as well. I'm glad you had that. I'm more concerned with the focus on equity, because we also talk about equity with people that don't intersect with race, like people with lived experience. There may be intersection. Folks are overrepresented, but not all folks. Talking about literacy and all of these other things. Equity is I'm trying not to stick my foot in it here.
That's right. That's right.
I'm gonna-
Come on. But what I'm saying is the working, the way we are working with equity is a bit broader than that. It absolutely includes this, but it's a bit broader.
Absolutely.
So
That's why I said, sounds like I got ahead of myself.
Yeah,
in our
what I'll say-
presentation.
And Joe, I see your hand, Q, I see your hand, but before I'll open it up for you, what I'll say is the definitions we're gonna go over are race, racism, race equity lens, white privilege, racial bias, and microaggressions, and then we'll talk a little bit about levels of racism. So just in case you're nervous we're not getting to some of these, we'll get to some of them. But go ahead, Joe, and then Kiva.
After what you just said, I'll bypass what I was gonna say. I don't like where the conversation's going right now, but I will keep my mouth shut and I will wait to see where it goes next.
Okay.
Thank you for bringing us out, right? Telling us you're gonna give us all these things. I just think that it's really important that we do not downplay the intelligence of human beings. I am a high school graduate and I have some college. I've helped 3 children get through college up to master's degrees. Very smart. I just didn't do it myself. But I said that to say that these definitions sound fine to me. I don't hear any jargon. I don't hear anything that I wouldn't understand. And I'm not going to assume just because people are of a different race or people are in a different economic status or have a different living situation that they are not going to understand it. So let's not assume.
Thank you. Okay, I'll move us to the next slide. So race equity and race equity lens. So I appreciate, Alex, thank you for commenting about race forward's definition. I wrote a note here so we can pull that in as well. But the definition given by C4 Innovations, racial equity is the condition where one's racial identity does not predict their social, health, or economic outcomes. A little bit shorter, a little less action oriented, but I think in the same spirit of what I heard from Race Forward as well. The race equity lens is a way of viewing the world in an integrated and holistic manner, taking into account past and present racial injustices and seeking to address them through more equitable practices and structures. So this is the more action-oriented sort of definition of how do you practice racial equity. Any reactions?
Now I'll say
As well as-
something.
Okay, go ahead, Joe.
So I'm glad, okay, so a lot of folks who are in this meeting now were not a part of this original start, right? Like when we got this was like 3 years ago. How long ago was this that we got this equity return that we're looking at this screen right now? Like,
Our final presentation was 2022, but I think y'all started around 2020, 2021. Yep, it took a long time.
right, yeah, so this isn't just all of a sudden, like, this isn't just, and where I was getting frustrated was because the slide before this was just on 2 definitions, but it started going towards equity. And didn't we already talk about what equity was? And that's why we're in this committee. Like, we already have an equity definition, but now we're looking at race definition. And now we're combining both race and equity after getting individual definitions of those 2, right? Like, we're not redefining what equity means. We already know what equity means and why we're here. And then when you put it into race equity, that's then systematic, which then I guess the next slide is going to start talking about that more systematic thing. Because I think even another one of my frustrations is that we have these definitions, but like Jamie J said, where are they going to live? What's the point of them? How are we going to use them? I'm not quite sure where, what, why right now, ...
And that's part of the goal. The goal is to not have to have this conversation over and over unintentionally, right? Because it's one thing to have this conversation over and over intentionally and try and evolve and develop and keep building. That's great. But a lot of times I observe in multiple places, not just here, we'll have a conversation and then we'll go, does this meet our definition of equity? And then someone will have their definition of equity and then we'll have a definition that we thought we were working, it's not memorialized, right? So the goal with just starting with these is to have something to point back to. And if we discover, hey, in the work that we're doing, it's not meeting this goal of equity, but it's meeting a goal that we have in mind, maybe we change the definition to fit our group a little bit better, because there are organizations out there that can lead you through year-long work sessions on developing these sorts of custom definitions, and that's great. I'm glad those things exist, and we've got some pretty good starter to start with, right?
By the way, I'm used to in our meetings, I remember where these slides come from. I've seen them before. What I'm saying is I'm used to having them all at the same time. So as we start, I'm not used to just the first slide without the other couple. So I don't have, it was like, oh yeah, context. So
I don't mind it being big enough for me to see, sir. If you want to- I'm I'm just gonna sit and see. Stay with me.
I'm adjusting to this non-Zoom brownout world right now, so.
So hearing that there's no major objection to what the definitions that are in front of us are, this can be a good starting point for us to, as a committee, use these definitions of race equity and race equity lens. And again, I want to pull in that race forward definition too, because I really like the way that that was worded. Okay, so white privilege. White privilege, unearned assets, immunities, permissions, advantages, benefits, and choices available to people based on their belonging to a dominant group. In this case, white people. Those who experience such privilege are often unaware of it.
At the risk of setting something off, I think white, when used with people, is not capitalized.
Ah, thank you. Yep, true.
Yep.
Thank you.
And that's a whole nother interesting conversation as well, but for another time.
I also don't see a systematic, there's no systemic definition in this definition of white privilege. Maybe unearned assets, maybe.
Joe, would you add anything to?
Maybe
more robust?
systematic advantages. Maybe that's kind of what I'm like, maybe, but they're all different advantages. I don't know. Systematic something.
Mhm. Okay. That's a good note in there. Oh, go ahead.
I mean, just to chime in, either systemic, or I would even say historically have been
Yep.
privilege. So,
Yep.
and that kind of like really covers it broadly.
And also too, oh, this was another thing that I was kind of trying to having an issue with, is that none of the definitions are specifically to people who are experiencing homelessness. It's just a vague, it's not specifically.
I'm sorry, you guys, we had some more power issues. And so we lost, after we heard about historic as an addition, we lost the big screen and the camera in this room.
Nice.
So thank you for bearing with us. Okay.
It's the system trying to shut us down, Jamie.
The system trying to shut us down.
Well, and just to give you all a little perspective, I've been getting emails this whole entire time about trees down and right now on fires, responding to 75 incidents of
Wow.
lines down or trees down. So any of you who are
Yeah.
traveling, be careful.
Okay. So everybody be careful on your way back home after this meeting.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, coming up the 402 narrow lanes, you get right next to that one big truck that looks like it's kind of wobbling too much.
Yeah, and I plugged in my phone. Of course, I realized, oh wait, I haven't been charging, so I'm down to like 5%. So. Oh, good times.
Oh, goodness.
So I'm gonna go to my car so I can charge my phone. But
Okay, another 2-minute break. We'll be right back.
okay. Okay, fine.
This is hilarious.
Well, just to give you all a little bit more information here, one of our fire engines was hit by a tree while they were responding to another incident. And there's trees down on power lines, on houses, in roadways, so it's pretty crazy out there.
No, I don't hear Wayne talking. No, Wayne.
Nope.
Hi, guys. I think to stay in compliance with Brown Act, we probably need to end the meeting because I'm not sure that we have, well, yeah, like, so I'm not clear that people can see and hear everybody that's happening here. So the
Yeah.
good news is we covered all the important stuff we needed to get through. But I actually think in the interest of like, especially, I see you, Jill, hello. We should probably end the meeting also so people can get home safely, but I don't know how long it will be until this whole system gets back up. And I think by law, we have to have people be able to see and hear, which I don't think we can do in this current bizarre moment. So with
I can
that,
see
I
you got- I
think
can
we all
see
get half an
everybody-
hour of our lives back to stay safe and sit in traffic and not get hit by trees. I'm really sad. Oh. Okay, be safe, everyone. Sorry.
You all did a great job with all
I
the
hope you all, and we'll
obstacles.
send out a recording. We'll post a recording of this, and also I will reach out to folks for the working group. All right, never dull moment. Thanks, everybody.